Okay, so today I wanted to talk about how I have learned to relate to my child as they've transitioned. I remember very early on when they were about 10 maybe, they were talking to me about feeling that they weren't a female. And they said, "Do you know what that feels like?" And that really threw me for a loop. I think one of the things that is really scary for parents of children who transition is that they don't feel like they know what it feels like to have gender dysphoria. They just cannot relate. And I think when you can't relate to something, it makes it more scary. You think this is somehow wrong or it's not understandable. Um, Sorry, I'm seeing my eyes. I look really puffy, but I've just got really dry eyes right now. Um, mm. So when my child asked me at 10 years old if I could relate to feeling like I wasn't a female, if I had moments in my life where I felt that's not that's not how I identify. I found that initially really challenging because I thought, no, I don't think I've ever felt like I wasn't a female. But I actually started to realize, I think might have been flipping through an old photo album. I'll see if I can find the photo that I think might have reminded me about feeling less feminine. There was a time, probably when I was 11 or 12, I had a very feminine burst when I was allowed to play with makeup. I had girlfriends who would come over and teach me whatever different makeup styles there were and how to use a whole can of hairspray on my fringe to get it to stick straight up. I realized I don't like having all this crap on my face. I don't like having all this hairspray in my hair. I don't like poofy dresses. And I just completely went the other direction. And I cut my hair very short and wore just trousers and a loose top. And I think I would have called this my tomboy phase. Back then, that's what we would call it, for the most part. I know that people have transitioned throughout history, but the general public didn't have a language for it. Um, it wasn't as talked about anywhere near as much as it is today. So back in the early 1990s, when I was having my tomboy phase, that was the language that I had. I wonder what would I have thought if I had access to a whole community of people who decided or felt that they were not their birth gender and they decided to transition. At 12, 11 and 12, I wasn't sure where my pendulum was going to slow down at. Um, and I don't know how much of who I am today has been shaped by society and a lack of permission to be somebody different. Um, but yeah, so the question, they, back then they were still a she, but the question that they were asking me, have I ever had that feeling of not being female? And I think, yeah, actually I have. I just didn't know that I could name it. I didn't know that that's what you could call it. And when you don't have a name for something, you often don't hold on to the experience that that's what that is. And then that makes me realize actually this is really a lot more normal. And it's scary for parents when they're like, oh, that wasn't a thing back in my day. Well, it was. We just didn't have the words. Um, you find yourself, you find where you fit on the spectrum of gender. And also, yeah, so the world today has a lot more permission to completely change gender than what it did when I was growing up. I don't know that that's a bad thing. It's it's different, but the inclination, the feeling I'm not quite fitting into this mold, that's not new. This kind of moves along to the question, do you have a gender dysmorphia? One of the things I've heard from people who have needed to transition from being female to male is how they felt about their breast. So this desire to have top surgery. And I've had multiple discussions with multiple people about what would be, why is that, how would that make your life different? What would be the feeling? What would be the outcome for you? And repeatedly across, there's not one specific person who has said this. It's been said repeatedly by multiple people, the word freedom. That is the expression I'm getting from multiple people. It would feel free. And I've always wanted to like really understand that because for me, the idea of cutting off my breast wouldn't give me that. I wouldn't feel free. I wouldn't feel more comfortable in my body. And it's hard to relate to that. But I was, for a long time, was really limiting myself to considering how different body modifications could affect a feeling of freedom and a feeling of being comfortable in your body. And I would have realized is while I wouldn't want to get rid of my breasts, I actually am not thrilled with my stomach. My stomach has always been a place where I've carried weight since puberty. I felt just so uncomfortable with it. I hate it. I know you're not supposed to say that. We're supposed to be body positive. We're not supposed to say we hate a part of our body. I do appreciate my body, but really wish I didn't have a big stomach. Really wish my weight didn't go there. That's a whole other video that maybe has to do with hormones, cortisol, and carbs. Not the point. The point is that is how I can understand the desire for top surgery is having the desire for a flat stomach, feeling like you can just throw on whatever clothes you want and go out and plop down and be yourself. And I think there's this sense of restriction because of the things that we don't feel comfortable with. So when somebody is saying to me that having top surgery would give them a sense of freedom and more connection with their body, I don't have to understand what it feels like to want to have top surgery. I can understand what it feels like to want to not have this big stomach that carries all my weight. And I would think other people can understand what it would feel like to fill in the blank. Think of the thing that they wish they could change. Gender dysmorphia, it's not something that only transgender people experience, but it is something that we tend to talk about only with regards to the transgender community. We don't actually talk about how very common this is. So gender dysphoria is when you feel discomfort due to your gender identity not aligning with your birth gender. So this means that we're born, we have a biological gender, and our bodies are meant to do certain things because of our biological gender, like make breasts if we're female, menstruate. If we're male, we grow facial hair. If we're male, we might have baldness. But as a female, I've also had facial hair. Not as much as men, thank God, but more than I would like. And that has, it's definitely caused discomfort. And, just it's been stressful. I've done things to try and deal with that. I'm now entering menopause, another very female trait. Also, not loving every part of it. I actually like my hair has gone curly since I've gone menopausal. So that's kind of nice, but in general, I'm not enjoying every single aspect of being female. I know men who have lost their hair and they are not loving that they lost their hair and it makes them feel insecure. And then they have to think about how do they address it. When we go to the doctors for these things, we go to the doctor when we get hormone replacement therapy. I'm a woman going through menopause and I'm not taking hormone replacement therapy yet, and I hope I don't have to, but it wouldn't be unheard of and it would be very easy for me to do. I could go in and say, yeah, I'm not happy with these changes my body are going through. I know it's very natural and very, it's something to expect by being female. but actually I'm not digging it. Can I get some um, HRT? And the doctor would not have a problem giving it to me. But if you are a person who's transitioning from one gender to another, the doctor wants to send you for a psych eval. So whether or not that's right or wrong, I think a person who speaks really well about this is a woman named Abigail Rose. She's a YouTuber. Her channel is called Philosophy Tube. I don't want to go too far down the road of speaking about what it's like to be a transgender person, but I'm trying to speak about my experience as a parent of how I can relate to transgender people. Um, Abigail, she speaks so well about the experiences of people who have transitioned, of her experience, and about laws and how things are versus how they easily could be. Um, so she would be somebody if you want to know more about the rights and how people who are transitioning are treated in healthcare. She would be somebody I would recommend watching. But in terms of being a parent and just relating to your child who is transitioning, these are some ways that you can relate to understand the discomfort they might feel in their body, um, to understand the fluctuations of finding themselves and their gender identity, the finding of a gender, finding gender. Nope. One more time. I'm gonna go for it one more time. Finding gender identity. It's a process, I think. It was for me. And if I had had, again, like if I had had the language back in the 90s for different genders, gender fluidity, I think probably I would have used that. I had no idea about gender fluidity. I didn't know that it was a thing. Today, people know it's a thing. So today we have words. I don't think that needs to make it more scary. We have language that we give to it that we didn't use widely a couple decades ago. But it doesn't mean that the human experience has changed. It just means we have more words. The human experience is still what it has always been, and we can relate if we want, and we just expand our thinking a bit. We shouldn't other. We shouldn't say, oh, that's a different thing. I've never encountered that. I don't know anything about that. Can't relate. That is othering. Don't be too quick to do that. I did it. I when asked, can you relate? My first thought was no. It took me a long time to realize actually that's not correct. I can relate. I know what it feels like to not know where I sit within the scale of gender. I have certain masculine traits and also some bitterness about certain qualities that men are more allowed to encompass than women. I've always liked to be funny and outspoken, and if I want to pursue something, I'm usually very like active in pursuing it. But especially when I grew up, and especially where I grew up, those were not considered to be very feminine traits. I was not demure and passive. I that just never was me. Um, and I felt like a wrong version of female because I wasn't doing the passive, demure, sweet thing. I was doing the aggressive, this is what I want, this is what I'm going to go after, and I'm going to be funny, and I'm going to make mistakes, and I'm going to mess up and be loud and rambunctious like those boys over there. So I had to find who am I within all of this. Um, yeah. So hopefully my rambling has offered parents something to think about if you've struggled, to think about how might you relate, how might you understand things. Have a think about all the different experiences you've had in your life. And also, I would say, don't forget that who we are today, I'm never going to be sure how much it has been because of societal conditioning. That, yes, I've said that I had a tomboy phase, and I feel like as 46-year-old woman that I feel I am who I am, that I was meant to be, but I don't know. I don't know. Who would I be if the world was so much more open. Um, that's an interesting question. I feel at peace with myself, and I think that's probably the most important thing. I feel at peace, but also, would it be wrong if I had developed into someone else? I don't think it would be. And we live in a world now where there's a lot more permission, a lot more language, um, a lot more clear directions we can go in without shame. We could be brave and think, wow, who might our children actualize into? I think we have to be brave. That's it. I think I'm done talking. Gonna shut up now.